Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, we're breaking down the first game of NBA Summer League, reactions so far, observations for the Timberwolves rookies on the team, especially Josh Minott, but also Wendell Moore, Mateo Spaniolo, and others that have impressed so far in Las Vegas Summer League, plus a couple of additional Timberwolves notes. It's all coming to the show. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked on Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked on Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. Today I want to talk some Summer League, a lot to get to. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked on Wolves your first listen every day. Locked on Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, from Apple to Google, Spotify to Odyssey. You can also follow this show on Twitter at Locked on T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, today on the show, I want to talk about the first Las Vegas Summer League game. Among other things, a couple of other Timberwolves notes we'll get to towards the end of the show. I am recording this due to some travel, other things, etc., after the first Summer League game on Friday night, but before the second Summer League game on Sunday. So these are observations from the first game. But I think that it's all still very relevant because turns out there's only like 5 games, and so they all matter equally. So I want to talk mostly about that game and also what my observations were, my expectations were coming into Summer League that were confirmed by the first game. So we're going to get into all that. The Timberwolves, of course, did win the first game of Summer League over the Denver Nuggets, 85-78. That does not matter. What matters is the individual player performances. And as a team, I will say, the Summer League, I didn't talk at all last week about Kevin Burleson, the head coach of the Summer League team. He's the Wolves player development coach. Of course, he's actually a former University of Minnesota Golden Gopher. His brother is Nate Burleson, the former NFL wide receiver for the Lions, Vikings, Seahawks, and current. He's on the CBS morning show and NFL Network for a long time, did Good Morning Football. So Burleson family, very well known. Nate Burleson is the Summer League head coach. And his squad, it was actually pretty reminiscent of last year's Summer League team, which had, of course, McKinley Wright, Isaiah Miller, some of these kind of more smaller ball pressure type guys. This Wolves Summer League team played the same way as last year's. And I don't think anybody on this team was on last year's team, except for, I guess, maybe Brian Bowen and Matt Lewis. But this team, which, by the way, Brian Bowen didn't play, which I thought was interesting. We'll get to that here in a minute. But this Wolves team, the ball pressure, the activity, really kind of a three-quarters court trap that they played for much of the game, but they were consistently picking up pressure past the timeline, beyond half court. And that was a ton of fun to watch. I mean, it was ultra aggressive, and they forced 17 turnovers from Denver over the course of this game. And early, both teams were very sloppy, but as the game went on, Minnesota got more comfortable offensively. And the game got close. Wolves had a double-digit lead for much of the second half, and then Denver pushed back, got it to within a point late. And then a couple guys we're going to spend a lot of time talking about were kind of the heroes down the stretch. Both Josh Minott and Wendell Moore didn't do as much in the fourth quarter, but Josh Minott was really good, had a big block at the rim. And then Kevon Harris, who is reportedly signed an Exhibit 10 deal with the Wolves. So, again, that means that he gets a bonus if he stays with the team and plays with the Iowa Wolves during the season. He gets paid a bonus and a higher salary for being an Exhibit 10 player. He'll likely be a training camp invite with that contract. But Kevon Harris was fantastic in the fourth quarter. Had just a massive dunk. The Wolves were only up 1, and he dribble handoff action, drove a seam to the left, or went around the dribble handoff, drove a seam down the middle of the paint, and with his left hand threw down just a nasty tomahawk. Got fouled in the face, made the free throw. The Wolves were up 4, and then up 5 with about 30 seconds left. Josh Minott had a fantastic dunk, or a fantastic block, I should say, at the rim. Actually, Wendell Moore got beat off the dribble. We'll talk more about Moore. I thought he had a pretty good game overall. But Moore got beat off the dribble, and Josh Minott swatted the shot at the rim and preserved that 2-possession lead with under 30 seconds to play. So a great defensive play by Minott. So overall, this was a really impressive performance on both ends of the floor by Kevin Burleson's group. And for me, what I want to do actually for the bulk of the show is break down individual performances. Of course, Minott, who is the most impressive, the 22 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block, shot greater than 50% for the floor, made a couple of threes. So I want to talk about Minott. I want to talk about Wendell Moore, the first-round pick, and then the other second-round pick, along with Minott, Matteo Spagnuolo, played 16 minutes off the bench. A couple of other guys, Kevon Harris, players that I think are important to talk about in this game, notably related to the rotation. Brian Bowen did not play, which who knows, maybe he got in late or something. No idea why. I would expect him to play at some point. And then Jacob Gilyard, who is a late addition to the roster. I mentioned him the other day, the 5-year college starter. I would expect him to play some minutes at some point too. The Wolves didn't really have I didn't really feel like they had traditional point guards on the floor very much in this game. Kevon Harris, I guess, would be by default that player in the starting lineup. But he didn't really function as a starting point guard. And Spagnuolo is more of a combo type guard. Terrell Brown Jr., I guess, would be the one off the bench, and he had some moments too as a 4-year college player, and nothing that really stuck out. But so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Gilyard played. And then also Philip Wheeler, who was reported he signed an Exhibit 10 deal. He was the high school athlete out of New Jersey that did not play college ball for academic reasons, played overseas, played in Puerto Rico, played for the Puerto Rican national team. So actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe that has something to do with it. But Philip Wheeler did not play in this game either, and was listed on the box score as a DNP CD. So a couple of interesting notes on the rotation. I want to get into individual players, especially those roster guys for the Wolves here in just a minute. And then we'll close with a couple of Timberwolves related notes that have cropped up. Players that are no longer on the free agent market that I had hoped maybe could be options for the Wolves. So we're going to do all of that here next. First, let's talk about our title sponsors of today's show. And that is, of course, our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's I guess midseason MLB, right? We're almost at the All-Star game here in a couple of weeks. And of course, Summer League. You'll find NBA Summer League on there. We're almost to NFL. Training camp starts in a couple of weeks. Preseason's like a little less than a month away now. So that's all on BetOnline. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, golf, and more. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, individual player performances. Josh Minott is the player everybody wants to talk about, and rightfully so. He was fantastic on Friday night in Vegas. 22 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block. Shot 8 of 15 from the field, 2 of 3 outside the arc. His only miss was kind of a heat check. The other 2 were very much in rhythm. Made all 4 of his free throw attempts. And I mean, my notes on Minott, it's exactly, if you listen to Friday's show, or if you saw me on Twitter touting the fact that I predicted this correctly, I predicted that Josh Minott would be really good in Summer League for all the reasons that he was really good. He's a very active player, likes to jump passing lanes. He didn't actually have any steals in this game, which surprised me, but that was kind of his MO in his relatively limited playing time, his one start, 14, 15 minutes a game or whatever it was at Memphis. Minott is an active player, jumping passing lanes, getting deflections, gambling at times for steals, grabbing offensive rebounds and getting buckets, ripping down defensive rebounds and sprinting down court. He did all those things except for the steals portion. He's very active, kind of faded into the dunker spot a couple times in the first half, got buckets that way, just had that feel where like, hey, this is the soft spot in the defense. I'm going to hang out here. He scored a bucket, maybe 2 as a cutter. He scored in transition a couple of times. Offensive rebounding, had a couple putbacks he just missed or were contested, a couple tip-in attempts, had some successful tip-in attempts. He had, by my count, 3 times he put the ball on the floor to get to the rim. I believe all in the second half. Twice he scored, and once he got to the line for a couple of free throws. That's something that I wasn't expecting him to have in his game. Now, I know it's Summer League. All those caveats, of course, apply. I'm not saying that they don't, but I was impressed with his ability to put the ball on the floor, even against Summer League defense, had a couple of nice hesitation moves, a step-through move to try and avoid contact, and actually drew a foul and got free throws on that particular play. So I was impressed with his ability. In my mind, he's an athlete. He's a straight-line driver, or I should say he's a cutter. He's a threat in transition. Maybe can hit some spot-up shots, which he did a couple of times in this game. But I was impressed with the ability to create for himself. He also had a really nice strip in transition during a pretty sloppy period of the game. I think it was early fourth quarter where he poked the ball away in an open floor fast break for the Nuggets and was impressive there. He didn't get credit for a steal. He should have. He poked the ball away. Somebody else grabbed it. But that would be, I guess, the one defensive play that stuck out besides the block I already talked about in the final minute of the game. Minott also operated in pick and roll as the screener with Wendell Moore a couple of times. Really good feel there on the timing of the roll. Just missed a bucket on a tough pass and catch attempt from Moore. But Minott was good as a screener. I mentioned the block at the rim. And then post game when he spoke with NBA TV, he talked about ball pressure. He talked about disruption. Those are his words, putting ball pressure, causing disruption, speeding up the other team. I mean, it showed a maturity, an understanding, like he knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing in this game, and they did it, and Minott was a huge part of it. So I was really impressed with Josh Minott, everything about his performance. The shot, the form is a little funky. It doesn't look great when he shoots jumpers, but the two that were good looks both went in. He only missed the one that was more of a heat check, off-balance attempt in the fourth quarter. But again, getting to the rim, making all 4 free throws, 3 assists. He did have 3 turnovers, but played extremely well. 25 minutes, which was second most on the team. And this is exactly the type of player the Wolves need in the rotation. To be clear, he will not be in the rotation for the Minnesota Timberwolves, the actual Timberwolves this fall. But he's making a case to be on the roster and be like the 11th guy and get some minutes here and there. I think it's more likely he spends a good chunk of the year in the G League. Think basically what Bolmaro did last year, and maybe he'll get his chance. Hopefully it's not due to injury, but perhaps he'll get a chance at some point. And it really is that kind of like Brandon Clark-ish role, the energy, the ability to stretch the floor a little bit, the activity on the offensive glass. You know, he's more parts a wing than he is a big, but I think his likely NBA role is probably as a 4. He's got enough size to do that, but obviously he's a 3-4 hybrid type player, but impressive performance. And it's not just the box score. It's not just the 22, 10, and 3. It's the activity. It's everything he brought to the table in this game. The second best player on the floor for the Wolves was likely Wendell Moore Jr. He had a quiet finish to the game, and it's easy to remember. And we'll get to Kevon Harris, the dunk, for obvious reasons, and Harris played great in the fourth. But Wendell Moore Jr. was very good, especially in the first half. Hit a couple of spot-up corner threes, was 2 of 3 on threes. All 3 attempts came from the corners, and the only miss rimmed in and out. The 2 makes were very confident, were very clean makes. 10 points, 4 rebounds, 4 of 9 shooting. Like I said, 2 of 3 from the corners. Didn't have any assists or steals. Handled the ball a little bit, initiated some offense in the pick and roll. Got to the rim once in the first half with a really nice finish. Kind of a slow motion finish. He did a couple though the second half where he had a hesitation move. And it kind of felt a little bit like we were watching Kyle Anderson. And that, of course, is one of the things with Wendell Moore is relatively modest athleticism, deliberate when he gets to the rim, but that can work. He's crafty enough and long enough to make that work. He had a couple of layups that just kind of spun out of the rim that weren't bad looks. And the initial move was good. The feel was good in terms of getting his shot off. So I thought Wendell Moore played well. He did all the things you would expect him to do. And the way I've described him is a well-rounded kind of a do-it-all role player. Essentially, is the best way to describe him. A two-way role player, I guess, is he's not a. Generally you talk about two-way players as guys who could be start like Jimmy Butler, right? That's not the expectation for Wendell Moore, and maybe it will be eventually, but he is what I would call a two-way role player because he can do everything. He can play defense, he can hit threes, he can put the ball on the floor a little bit, he can play make as a secondary playmaker. But I think in my mind, it's more of a high floor type of a player with a little bit of upside, sure, but a high floor type rotation guy. And he showed that in this game. Did a little bit more when he was asked to do it. I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive moving forward. But he fit into the role on the Summer League team extremely well and looked very comfortable. Looked like someone who could step into the rotation as the 8th, 9th guy right now and be effective for the big Timberwolves come this season, come this fall. The next best player on the floor for the Wolves was Kevon Harris, the Exhibit 10 player. He was a 4-year player at Stephen F. Austin and finished school in 2020. We talked about him a little bit the other day, but I guess just a quick overview because if you haven't heard of him, he had a really big game, and that dunk was massive. It was a highlight dunk. His last year at Stephen F. Austin, actually his last 2 years, he averaged over 17.5 points per game. And for his career, he shot just a shade under 40% from three. So he was kind of a do-it-all type guy. 77% from the line his senior year, averaged 17.5 points, 5.7 rebounds. A player that really did a little bit of everything. All the advanced metrics are good. The assist rate is good for somebody who wasn't a primary point guard there necessarily. Rebound rate, good for his size. Not a huge player, but he's 6'6" and can kind of play, can kind of initiate offense. He did a lot of that for the Summer League team. He's not a point guard. He's more of a point forward type, the ability to be a combo forward, point forward type player. He played for the Raptors G League team last year and played 11 games, started 7, averaged 14 and 5, and shot 40.7% from three. So he shot 40% from three in college, 40% from three in 11 games in the G League, and continued to be a pretty well-rounded player. Half of his shot attempts last year in the G League were from outside the arc. In this game, he did a little bit of everything as well. He hit a spot up three at one point. He scored in the paint. He hit a tough and one at one point, or I guess it wasn't an and one, a tough layup. And then he had the and one dunk later in the game, the and one poster with a minute left, up just one. He hit a tough step back two in the fourth too. Of his, what did he finish with this game with? 13 points. I believe 10 of them were in the fourth quarter, and finished with 13 points on 5 of 7 shooting, 1 of 3 outside the arc, 2 of 3 at the line, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 2 turnovers in 24 minutes. He was clearly the third best player on the floor for the Wolves in this game. And moving forward, again, Exhibit 10 guy, so he's kind of almost like a preferred walk-on, if you will, to training camp, and will very likely not make the team. I mean, I guess there's always a chance he lands a two-way spot. As somebody who can play good defense, has good size, can be an above-average shooter. I think that scouting reports for him in the G League was that he's a relatively good off-ball defender, has good awareness. Occasionally he can be a little bit too aggressive. He's got very good athleticism. So I see him as a two-way candidate legitimately. And more likely he sticks with the Exhibit 10. But somebody certainly to keep an eye on here for the rest of G League. Or the rest of the G League, I should say. Matt Lewis would be the other one to mention. He played for the Iowa Wolves last year. He had 9 points and did some of his damage in the fourth, including a really tough step back three that extended the Wolves' lead down the stretch. Spaniolo very quickly was part of a couple of lineups with Minott and Moore and initiated some offense, hit one really tough three, and then attempted another tough three that he should not have in the second half, and he missed it. That's kind of his MO, right? He can score, he can make tough shots, but sometimes he takes too many tough shots. We talked about him a couple of times already on the show, where shot selection is going to be something to keep an eye on. He's only 19, so that's understandable. 2 assists and a steal, no turnovers for him. He did look in control, good handle, solid defense, looked the part, exactly what you would expect from a very young player. In Summer League, with a lot of these guys are older, right? They're 4-year college guys, they're G League guys. I'm guessing he was the youngest or one of the youngest guys on the court in this game. And he looked the part. Just didn't do too much else besides those shot attempts and a couple of nice passes. But again, in control, solid all-around performance. So obviously keep an eye on him here moving forward. Okay. Next one I want to do a couple of Timberwolves-related notes, free agency, and then also something related to Karl-Anthony Towns' extension, the Supermax extension that came to light over the weekend. So we're going to do that here next to close the show. First, though, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com, both at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could possibly need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, to even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, closing the show today with a couple of important Timberwolves free agency and contract-related notes. First, Karl-Anthony Towns' contract extension. This was pointed out by multiple folks. I think Spot Rack and who's the other one that had it? I think Hoops Hype maybe reported this over the weekend that Karl-Anthony Towns, the final year of his Supermax is not guaranteed. It's actually a player option. So there's 3 years added onto his existing contract, which would mean that he's got 5 total years left plus a player option. So it's not quite as clean. Now, obviously, we're talking about several years from now, but it's notable. I mean, like his buddy Devin Booker signed his Supermax and apparently does have that final year on his contract. So Towns gets 2 more years on his current deal, $33.8 million this year, $36 million the following year. Then it jumps to $50 million in 24-25. 25-26, Gobert has a player option, and then Towns' player option will be in the 27-28 season. So we're still talking 5 seasons from now, so 6 years from now when Towns could opt out, when he's 33, I think at the time, which is 2 years after Gobert could opt out. So it's notable, and it's something that'll start coming up here once that extension kicks in a couple of years. If potentially trades are discussed, if something falls apart and the Wolves look to trade Towns, that could be something that helps or hurts them down the road. It's just interesting that was factored in to this deal, which, I mean, it's fair because it's the end of his prime, right? He'll be 32-ish at that point. And potentially, if he's still an all-NBA player and is getting, has gotten better, maybe that's his last chance to opt out and get an even bigger deal at the time. And then, of course, if that's not the case, then he's going to opt in and stick with the Wolves anyway. So I think that's a really notable development, even if it's not going to matter for a couple of seasons. But all that to say, the next 3 years, Towns and Gobert are under contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves. After those 3 years, Gobert could opt out in 25-26, and then 2 years after that in 27-28 is when Towns could opt out if he wanted to. So all that to say, I thought that was really interesting and not something I'd seen reported previously. And there you have it. The last thing I want to talk about is NBA free agency. Some names that I had mentioned last week as potential Timberwolves targets. Those guys have all found new homes. Gorgui Dieng, I mentioned, the former Timberwolf, left the Hawks in unrestricted free agency and is signing with the San Antonio Spurs. Of course, he played briefly for them, not this last year, but the year prior when he was traded there by Memphis, finished the season in San Antonio, went to Atlanta last year. Going back now to the Spurs, so good for Gorgui. He should see some minutes there. It's crazy. He's now, about to be 33 years old. I mean, granted, he was an older rookie with the Wolves, but still crazy to think about. Bismack Biyombo is re-signing with the Phoenix Suns, is the report there. He's another player I thought they could have a shot at as a deep bench type guy. And then Frank Kaminsky just was reported on, I believe, Saturday. He's signing with the Atlanta Hawks. So taking really essentially Gorgie's spot in Atlanta. So Dieng, Kaminsky, Biyombo, all apparently finding new homes, or in the case of Biyombo, I guess, returning to Phoenix, all off the board when it comes to the Timberwolves. So who's left? I mean, who's left for the Timberwolves to consider adding to the roster here as the offseason kind of winds down, the free agency period winds down? Well, obviously Greg Monroe, who is still a free agent. And I mean, a former Timberwolf, right? He was on the roster in the playoffs. He played in the playoffs, a couple of rotation minutes here and there. He's still a free agent if the Wolves had interest in bringing him back. Others that are out there, Ed Davis, another former Timberwolf. He played a little bit for Cleveland last year. He clearly was nearing the end of the rope in terms of his functionality as an NBA player at the end of his career, or the end of his stint in Minnesota even. So I doubt he's an option. The obvious one would be DeMarcus Cousins, who of course is very familiar with Tim Connolly and has been talked about as an option. I said on this show probably about a week ago that I preferred the other three guys I just talked about, Gorgui, Kaminsky, and Biyombo, as options, as shorter minute type guys who could fit into that role. Cousins, he would have to accept he'd be like the 12th man, right? We're looking for depth pieces. Unless the Wolves trade Naz Reid, which is possible, then DeMarcus Cousins doesn't make a ton of sense. If the Wolves trade Naz Reid for, call it, a couple of second-round picks and bring in DeMarcus Cousins, I don't know that I love it, but it would make sense from a roster perspective, because then you're still talking Towns, Gobert. Those are, your lead guys in the front court. Nate Knight still has a qualifying offer out there, so pretty good chance Nate Knight ends up on this team at this point. But then besides that, that's it if you trade Naz Reid. So I think the only way that that DeMarcus Cousins ends up in Minnesota is if Naz gets traded, or maybe if Nate Knight goes somewhere else, then that's always a possibility as well. It's possible that Cousins could fill that role then with the Wolves, kind of that 11th, 12th man. But as it stands right now, they could probably use another point guard just as much as they could use another big. If Nate Knight comes back, we probably are just looking at like a third string point guard type, because right now it's just D'Angelo Russell and Jordan McLaughlin, and you're expecting the third point guard role to be filled with basically Jalen Noel. Bryn Forbes could play a little bit there. So you've got some kind of in a pinch guys, and then obviously a couple more players that can initiate offense. Of course, Anthony Edwards, Wendell Moore potentially, and then obviously Jalen Noel, who I already mentioned. So the free agency class is absolutely thinning out at this moment, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things finish out and how the Wolves finish out the roster. And these guys in Vegas, I mean, they obviously know the Wolves have a couple of roster spots left. You never know. Jordan McLaughlin played his way into a two-way contract in Vegas a couple of years ago. Naz Reid played his way from an Exhibit 10 or from a two-way deal into an actual NBA partially guaranteed deal because of Summer League. So, I mean, Naz, Jordan McLaughlin, those are the success stories. And then, of course, Jalen Noel and Jaden McDaniels both played well last year in Summer League too. So definitely going to be fun to watch the Summer League team continue to play. They, of course, also played Sunday and then games this week, back-to-back, I believe Wednesday and Thursday of this week as well before they enter the tournament portion of Summer League. So we'll keep an eye on that all week long. Shows Monday through Friday. As always, make sure you're following and subscribe to Locked On Wolves. A big thank you to those of you that do make this show your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube. And of course, you can also listen on Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you listen. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And a reminder that you can make your second listen the Locked On NBA show. You can get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.